dialogue. It's the Media Task Force of the Eastern and Southern Africa Interagency Working Group for Risk Communication and Community Engagement. My co-moderator, as usual, is Tole Nyata. He's an Internews pandemic media mentor based currently in Zambia. The Marburg virus, it's a close cousin of Ebola. It can kill as many as 90% of the people it infects, and has appeared recently in Tanzania and Equatorial Guinea for the first time in either country. The government of Equatorial Guinea reports 9 confirmed and 20 suspected Marburg deaths there since January. And Tanzania has seen 5 confirmed Marburg deaths since March. Marburg and Ebola have similarities but are different. So today we're going to talk about both Ebola and Marburg and some of the differences and, of course, advice for journalists on how to cover these 2 very serious health emergencies in the region. To begin with, we're going to hear a really amazing story from Dr. Hadson Kunsa, a Ugandan physician who recently survived Ebola himself. We are also joined by not 1, but 2 Internews health media mentors who will talk to the journalists on this call about how they can cut through misinformation, report the facts about these disease outbreaks. And we will have a member of the RCCE working group from UNICEF who will share the latest community conversations, misinformation, and rumors on social media that we're tracking as a group. I'll remind you now that if you have a question for any of our speakers today, please just type it in the chat box, the Zoom chat box, and my co-moderator, Tole, will ask them of our speakers during this hour. Okay, let's get started. While on duty at a hospital in Mubende, Uganda last September, Dr. Hadson Kunsa and 5 colleagues contracted Ebola from the first known patient in the 2022 Ebola virus outbreak. And of course became severely ill. After receiving supportive care, he and 2 other colleagues recovered and were able to return to clinical work. Dr. Kunsa is dedicated to using his experience, insights, and knowledge in order to inform epidemic prevention and control. Dr. Kunsa joins us now to share his story and provide guidance on dealing with disease outbreaks in Africa. Dr. Kunsa, welcome to the Media Dialogue. Can you hear us? You're on I think you're muted, Dr. Kunsa. Hello?
I also have no audio from Dr. Kunsa.
Hello, can you hear us, Dr. Kunsa?
Just a suggestion, Wayne, from our side, maybe what we could do is swap the order so that Dr. Kunsa can sort out if he's got any challenges. And maybe we could just, because that'll give him some time. So maybe we can then start with Marburg and then go into Kate and then
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Sorry, Dr. Kunsa. Sorry, there's a terrible breakup.
Speaking, can you hear me? Dr.
Okay,
Kunsa,
now.
Can you hear me, please?
Hello, can you?
just a suggestion when Dr. Kunsa can sort out if he's got any, because that'll give him some time. So
Can everyone hear me, please?
Oh, yeah.
Hi.
Dr. Kunsa. Okay, now. Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me try to share my screen, and then I will try to do my little presentation right now. And please, you keep confirming if you can hear me. I'm quite up country. The network might not be so good, but I'm going to try to.
We can hear you.
We can hear you. Okay. Okay. Just a second. Okay. Okay. Can you see my screen? I'm trying to project my presentation, please.
Not yet.
Not yet. Not yet. Okay. Sorry for the disturbance. Host does not attain screen share. Oh, okay. Sorry. Maybe the host, according to my end, it shows that the host doesn't allow sharing of my presentation. So I can go on to present without you seeing the slide. Is it okay?
Yeah, and Christoph, you have the slides.
You have the slides.
You can try, please. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Christopher. I'm trying to see if you can be able to share, and then I go on, please.
You can now share your screen.
You can now share your screen. It works. All right. Thank you. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
No.
No. All right. Just give me only a second, please. It was easy yesterday. It was quite easy yesterday. And now it's okay. Can maybe Christopher has any guys to share for me from that end as he tries? I try to follow from his end. Just a second. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Okay.
There we are.
There we are. There we are. Are we able to get it?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. All right. All right. All right. How about there?
I think you can go.
Is it? You can go. I can go on. All right. Okay. Thank you so much. This is Dr. Kunsa from Uganda. I'm a physician. Okay. And I am currently being placed in Mubende, and this is where I encountered my Ebola cases, and I got sick with colleagues. So I'll try to focus more on the personal experience, and I've gotten an opportunity to also interact with fellow survivors, and it's given me an insight of what really the survivors really go through, particularly the Ebola survivors. Okay, and okay, just a second. Okay, so now can I start screen share? Okay, so are we? Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear.
Yes, we hear you loud and clear. I have challenge with even moving my own presentation, but I don't know if the person there can help me remove. Okay, yeah, thank you so much. You will be following with me. So there is just a brief definition about what Ebola virus infection is according to WHO. And we can move to the next one. Yes, Christopher. Yes, Christopher, we can move. Different options. Okay, so just a brief talking about sharing about how Ebola is transmitted and how we got in contact with it. I've come to really appreciate how we were infected, and now the literature talks about the different levels of transmission. So we, as the health personnel that were at the hospital, we actually got in touch when we received this patient in our facility, and we were managing other conditions, and without knowing, and that's how we got sick. But we learned that this patient actually infected over 38 people. So we can see how the transmission usually happen. I'm sure we were with Katarina. She was able to interact with some of these patients, some of these survivors, and we could see how the transmission really happened. Can we move to the next one, please? Okay, so some of clinical symptoms, as we know, that it should be emphasized that Ebola is a multi-systemic infection. That is very, very important to emphasize that, because I always made this statement that if one of our colleagues hadn't died, it was possible that all of us were going to die. But when our colleague died and he didn't die of the wet symptoms, we actually appreciated more the fact that Ebola virus, it's a multi-systemic disease. And our colleague, two of our colleagues, they died, and they didn't really die of wet symptoms or electrolyte imbalance. I remember my colleague died of respiratory arrest. He had a respiratory failure, and he was circulating in 50, and me personally, I was circulating in 80s. So it's very important to appreciate that fact. Can we move to the next one, please? Okay. Okay. Could we move to the next one, please, Christopher, if it's you controlling? Okay. Okay, so these are some, again, the clinical symptoms which patients present with. Initially, a patient would have features which are mimicking the common febrile conditions that we have in the tropics. Some of them being malaria, typhoid, and others. And as the time goes on, depending on maybe the immunity, the virulence of the virus, and the other factors, you could see the symptoms either coming down or really progressing to the peak, and then you see them going down or killing the patient. So even as the doctors, when we got sick, we actually didn't think about Ebola first. We thought about other things like malaria, typhoid, the common infections which are usually there, not actually the Ebola. So, and this is the case with also our patients that got sick, because if me, the doctor, can think that, oh, this is not Ebola initially, now how about the patient? That's why we received the initial cases when someone has spent over 2 weeks in moving from clinic to clinic, health center to health center, infecting all those people. Move to the next one, please. Yes, Christopher. Okay. Okay, the next slide, because we talked about this. So the next, we are trying to talk about the management, like just giving an overview about the management. You know, all these things that we are going to give are going to give us an insight about what we went through as the doctors and as the patients. So I am presenting this in the perspective of a doctor and the patient at the same time. So we know that management of Ebola, if a patient presents early enough, it's very important that the chances of survival are really high. And also when the patient gets to know that we should know that the Ebola virus or that disease, we don't have a definitive treatment. So most of them we do is supportive. We give fluids, we give we give oxygen, we give drugs that stop bleeding. So we do all these supportive management according to how the patient presents. And also this poses some bit of challenge as we're going to see in the next phase. Can we move on, please? Yes, Christopher. Yes, Christopher. Okay, so this is trying to show us how the management has been, how the patients can interact and see their relatives from quite a distance, and the doctor who is equipped in his PPE is trying to take care of the patient. Let's move on, please. And then we move on, please. Yes, Christopher. Yeah, so here I'm trying to take you through our personal experience. That has been more of the theoretical bit. So I was working at the emergency unit in Mubende and received a patient who had spent 2 weeks sick in the peripheral clinics. And around that period, the patient was having positive malaria tests, and this misguided right from the clinic to the level when the patient arrived to our level. Because when the patient arrived to us, we were using, we were managing the patient under the medical team. And after 2 days, 2 to 3 days, seeing no improvement, we did further investigations, and then we found that the patient actually has a gut perforation. That was around 17th of September, before they declared the outbreak on 20th September 2022. And without even knowing, the suspicion was there, but because of malaria, vomiting, and diarrhea, we didn't think of it could be Ebola. So we took the patient to actually theater, and we started operating on the patient. And unfortunately, our patient was quite ill. He didn't survive. He died from So we think that this in a way exposed us to the high doses, and we were sick in 2 days. It was very surprising. That's why we didn't think of Ebola, because when we was sick, and then 3 days, 4 days, all the entire team was really sick. It couldn't do its normal activities. We started with minor symptoms, fevers, general body weakness. Me personally, I couldn't go to do my general work. I couldn't do my usual routine work at the hospital. I had to stay in my house with fevers of 40 degrees Celsius, and they just feeling a bit not okay. So my first instinct was to check out other things, malaria, typhoid, and all these were negative. And then that's when I decided to go to the hospital to do a test of Ebola. And 2 days I wasn't hearing from them, and I knew that possibly I could be sick. And this is where everything starts. Like, I actually thought about, should I run away? Because I could see the situation we're in. Like, we were getting suspects, we're mixing them with already sick patients. We didn't have any facility ready to handle these patients. So I had that fear that, oh God, I'm sick. Well, what am I going to do? Should I be in the first step of management when actually allowed me the permission to share with them the photos. We can go back a bit, please. And at this moment, before there, we were having minor symptoms. We could take photos, we could smile, we could sit around. So we thought it will never get serious. And as we moved on, our friends were sick, a bit sick. They could not even hold. They had to be on oxygen. And we can move to the next one. And here we were fertility. And when we reached there, I think the symptoms were getting worse and worse. So we can see here trying to bring out the organs that were being affected. And then you can see here Dr. Kunsa was dehydrated to his core. Like, I was really, really dehydrated. There is no level of rehydration that they could do that could help me. My lips were dry, my throat was dry. I was having like 20 episodes of diarrhea and vomiting in a single day. I would hear consultants discussing how my liver is shutting down, my kidneys are shutting down, and it was really, really bad. I was saturating at very low, well, like at around 80%. I needed oxygen therapy. So around this state, this is where the symptoms were at the maximum. And this is where I had actually given up. I had lost already my friend who was a roommate to me. I just called him in the night. He's not responding. He's trying to send a wheel on his phone so that people home can know what to do when he passes on. He's on oxygen, he's struggling, and I can't even stand up to really help them. So it was really a very hard moment. I just woke up at 3 and they're telling me, oh, I'm just asking them, like, I'm not hearing from him. Yeah, that really, 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 I rejected the drugs. I didn't want any interaction with everyone because I knew I'm a doctor. I was having that mentality. What are you going to do for me? You're doing supportive treatment. You're not doing anything. So it was quite a very, a very trying time. And with medical personnel, they really need kind of a special treatment, because not because they are doctors or medical personnel, it's because they are vulnerable. When you talk about my liver failing, I understand what it means. If you talk about my kidney failing, I understand everything. So it puts me at a vulnerable state whereby I don't know what you're going to do. I know my capacity in the country. You can't do for me dialysis. You can't. So I know all that, and it really, really hits me hard as compared to a common patient who has all the hopes in you. That's the doctor. And there the symptoms were really high. And I want to acknowledge the importance of psychotherapy. This is the moment where we needed a lot of psychotherapy, and I want to appreciate that we really got some from the different psychosocial team that was there. And during that moment, you couldn't eat, but you needed someone to be there to tell you, eat something. And me personally, I don't have a lot of social bit of life that can really move me here and there. My life is mostly about medicine and all that. So I appreciated the need of a social life, because I couldn't think about soccer, I couldn't think about movies, I didn't think about music, and all these were slowly making me give up. They were really like trying to put me down spiritually. My friends could talk about soccer, they laugh. They talk about sports betting, they laugh. They talk about different things. And me, my doctor told me on discharge, he was like, Dr. Kunsa, you are going to die for 4 days and you will be in your bed and we wouldn't know that you're dead, because you had given up. No one would tamper with you. No one wanted to, because no one would come to really tamper with me. Like, I would like just lock all of them out, because that is how much negative I was in my heart. And it really helped a lot when I had my girlfriend visit. When she visited, yes, I couldn't stand to see her, but I knew she was there, and this kind of uplifted my soul from inside. And it wasn't like the drugs, it wasn't everything, but it was just that psycho bit that was making me give up. I'm a Christian, but I couldn't pray. I was just saying that, God, just give me a second chance. I go back home. Like, I don't need even to go back to the hospital. I just need to go home and walk on the streets and just go home. So it was a very, very difficult moment in that time. And imagine this is happening to a doctor that has some bit of medical knowledge. Now imagine someone that has no medical knowledge at all. So it was really a very trying moment. So the psychotherapy was really a very great bit of it. So at this moment, I'm trying to show you how our doctors, when we lost 2 of our colleagues, I gave up, but our doctors didn't give up. They came, they started trying to make us eat, trying to talk to us. And at this moment, you could see in the morning, I was being able to put in a wheelchair and brought outside and try to see some people, and so that I can be able to laugh, to lift up my soul. And it was really good, because at this moment, this is when I was bleeding from all parts of my body, and I really didn't know that I would ever make it out, because I knew the list that they had. I knew the list that had stable, unstable, critical, very critical, and I was the only critical patient there. So I really knew all this, and it put me at a very vulnerable part. And yeah, but I'm really grateful for the doctors that they did their part and they didn't give up on us. However much we really didn't give them a very good moment. So the very difficult patient you'll ever meet will be your fellow medical personnel. You can move to the next one. Okay, so now here, this is the moment when we had recovered. We had actually lost 2 of our colleagues, and surprisingly, even the consultants don't know how I made it out. They told me that they would discuss my labs and they'd be like, are these lab results from a living person? Or, and like everything was deranged. And my friends that were actually a bit healthier than me didn't make it out. And they kept on telling me that, like, we don't know, all your organs were failing, but you made it out. And I'm grateful to God and the doctors that really did a very great work to not give up on me and my other colleagues. So can move to the next one, please. Yeah. So this is that moment was when we had transferred from Fort Portal facility to Entebbe facility, where we were discharged. And we were in Fort Portal, so we were able to receive various supportive treatment, as I talked about. And to emphasize, we also received some antiviral called remdesivir, and some of our colleagues were able to receive the monoclonal antibodies. And yeah, they got better. We had like 1 or 2 that received, and they got better. And 2 of the colleagues passed on, and also us, we got better. But all of us, I'm sure, we received the remdesivir, that drug that was tried on the Zaire variant, and it didn't work well. But I think that is left to the team that was handling the drug to tell us their outcomes. So about the survivor's life, yeah, from the moment of having multiple organ failure, I was able to return to my work in 2 weeks. Yeah, but this was mostly, I think it was a coping mechanism for me to avoid the stress, the too much thoughts, all those that were surrounding the illness. Within 2 weeks, everyone told me to take off 4 months home, but I couldn't, because I kept on thinking about all the situation that happened, everything, being the doctor that mobilized the team to operate on the patient, and they died and I didn't die. So I felt like I should have been the one to die so that they can survive, because it's me that called them to work on the patient. So all this kept on disturbing me, had sleep disturbances and stress, memory issues, and I had to return to work for 2 weeks, and no one knew, but I couldn't handle work. So I always had to take breaks all the time. I lose my breath. I can't see well. I have to go and sit down and come back and work, because I couldn't handle being at home alone. And at that moment, I was able to meet the Dr. Gerard Mwima that really came up. They had organized about the survivors program, and we started interacting with several survivors. And it was very interesting to learn that this, whatever you're going through, whatever you're experiencing, actually other people are also experiencing it. And our survivors, we actually found out that they have a lot of medical and psychosocial issues that need to be addressed, like as I'm going to share in the next slide. Christopher, I can move to the next one, please. Yeah, so that's just a photos trying to show you. These were taken after my time when I've resumed work, and I used to keep my hair, a lot of it, and I had to trim it off because I got alopecia. So I don't even know if it's from the drugs or from the disease and all that, but I had to do that. And can we move to the next one, please? Okay, so let me just give you a brief summary about the different challenges that survivors really go through. And we realized that all these survivors, when they're just recovered, they had general body weakness, their joints were paining. Most of them complained of lower back pain. The ophthalmology issues were also arising, seeing those floating black particles in their eyes, and the back pain. And for the part of the males, it was very, like, it was very serious. There was a serious problem of painful scrotal swelling, and this was really painful, and it warranted readmission of some of the survivors. And this rose issues like, of course, stigma in the community. You've taken back the person that they have healed, now they have gotten a complication, and now you're going back with the ambulances to pick this person. So the community doesn't understand it. It really like gets confused. Like, you told us the patient has healed, so why are you taking them back? So these are some of the bits where we would appreciate the bit of the media, the journalism to come in and put up communication, like which is right to the community, and trying to sensitize them a lot. Because like, it posed a very big challenge. Most of the survivors were not really willing to come back to hospital, yet they have a real problem that needs to be addressed. And there arose another challenge from most of these survivors. They were trying to ask, are we going to be able to produce our own children? Because we are having this, you told us we healed, but now we are having painful testicular swelling. So will we have children? And that is also there to really try to find out and help them in future. And we do semen studies to see if they can be able to have children, or what could have been affected. And the psychosocial, this is just a summary of challenges that we experienced, and I got some of them through my interaction with the survivors. And about also the other issue of, like, we had mothers who had miscarriages, they had fresh stillbirths, babies dying immediately being born, and then you have to explain to the mother that now your breast milk still has the virus in it there, and then, like, now one breast is giving you milk that is free of the virus, now this one is having the virus. So this is information that is there that we need to give to our patients, but it's not easy for them to digest. They really feel like we are trying to play on their minds, telling them now one breast has the virus, the other one doesn't have, yet the mother healed from the virus. So this is where like the bit of communication and journalism has to come in and emphasize some of these to the patients. And then the psychosocial bit, we had those challenges. Memory, there is a serious issue with the memory, and stigma. Oh my God, there is a challenge with a stigma, because when I start telling you all the stories, there are too many about stigma. I will tell you about myself, like the one that happened the most, that hurt me the most, is when my fellow medical personnel would not allow me to maybe touch their children or treat their children. They try to ignore you because you're a survivor. So you'd be like, maybe these are medical personnel, they should understand, but I don't know, they have that fear in them. And moments when I had to run back to my residential, and then my landlord had to keep on reminding me, okay, inquiring, but doctor, are you sure you're okay? Are we okay with you here? Like, are you sure? Because they had to come to my house and picked everything. They picked the mattresses, all my clothes, took them, burnt them, sprayed the entire house, did everything. So that's the right thing, but it's quite traumatizing to the community and the people living around. And in return, when I come back, it stigmatizes me in a way that even the lady where I buy things, normal things to use at home, she could not handle my money physically. She always had to, let me say, to tell me like put the money there, and she gives me the things. So she had to like, I don't know, like always maybe she comes and sprays the money before she takes it. And this is on top of other things that were really, really happening. I had the wedding of my friend I couldn't attend because the friends assured him that if I come, they won't come. So I had to really back out. And now from my survivors that I was reviewing in the clinic, through my volunteer work in the clinic, I discovered that we had children that were denied school. A child is denied school because the child comes from a family that got sick. So the school told them, no, you cannot come back to our school. And we had families breaking up. The man got sick and they told him he has to use protection for 1 year or until the semen-analysis comes out negative. And the woman says, no, they told us you have to abstain for 1 year. And the man, he's a married man. He says that is quite impossible for him. And the families actually ended up like breaking up in those communities. And then we had children being denied, or like a family member being denied by his own family to return home. They tell you, no, you got sick, you can't come back home. And then we had people losing businesses. People can no longer come to your business when you recovered from this. And that has been on top of so many other things, that other stigma that has been happening in the communities. Yeah, and I may not be able to share all of them, but those are some of the few. People lost businesses, like livelihoods were destroyed. So this is trying to show you, this is the day when we were able to launch the Survivors Clinic in Mubende. And this is the time I was starting to review patients in the clinic, because when I thanked the doctors that took care of me, they told me like, yes, thank you, you're great. We are great. We are happy that you're grateful, but you just need to go back and do the good we've done to you. And I'd swore to God not to come back to Mubende. I didn't want to come back to Mubende because I was like, oh God, I haven't had I'm just starting to really like enjoy my profession and all that, and it's going to kill me. No, I need to go home and look at other things. But then I realized that it's what I signed up for, and it's what makes me happy. So I decided to go back, and that's where Katharina met me in Mubende, still doing my routine, usual work. So, okay, can we move to the next one? Yeah, so this is the times we are trying to launch the Survivors Clinic. I'm wrapping up, and we move on, please. So I just have some few individual opinions about this, and one of them is community health. I've always communicated about it, but I think now I've picked more interest. This has been my turn point about it. Like you have to move, like you have to go and see what patients really make them sick. Like if we really move out to the communities and we try to talk to them, try to teach them these things, they do not really, they wouldn't, many conditions will really stop. And for example, I have this challenge. I love babies so much. For some reasons, I treat them, they get better, they laugh, they make me happy. So I find it hard and traumatizing to my life that I keep on losing babies due to false tooth extraction and so many other primitive cultural practices that have been happening all over again. And as the doctors and the other medical personnel, we are seated in our facilities, we keep on waiting for these babies to come. We're able to save some few, then we are able to lose most of them because they come when it's late. You find a baby has been cut, has become septic, they cut out the uvula, someone cuts a part of the tongue, for so many cultural practices. And this is not for the community or the parents or anyone to blame. It's the blame that should be on the public health specialists and the medical personnel. We need to move out there and try to teach the communities so that we can be able to stop some of these conditions that are able to be stopped. And another opinion that I think of, like doctors or the medical personnel should be given a priority in most of these medical conditions, because whenever we get sick, it hits us harder. You can imagine that all of us that got sick, none of us sought health care very fast. All of us delayed, the 5 of us. We delayed because we feel like the system, we get to know everything, and by the fact that we know everything, we feel like we can help ourselves. We try to shy away. So the doctor, the medical personnel should be really given a priority, because they are vulnerable, not because they are special, but they are vulnerable. If you explain to me how you're going to manage Ebola, to me, I wouldn't be satisfied enough to come to the hospital, because all I want you to tell me, oh, you know what, I'm going to treat it and get better. But I know you're going to do supportive, you're not doing anything about the virus. So it it puts me at a vulnerable moment, and I should be helped. I just need help. Not that I'm going to be a difficult person, but I need help. So I think the systems should try to be supportive of their own. And then the treatment facilities, we've had several outbreaks, and according to me, the treatment facilities that I've seen, Fort Portal has the best treatment facility, because when you put a patient in that treatment facility and the relatives are able to come and see the patient, it lifts your spirit up. It improves your chances of survival. But if you put me into a tent where no one can come and see me, then I die, then you put me in a box, you come and bury me, like, it's hard for them to come to terms that their patient passed on. But if they come and see their patient is in this kind of state, they follow up. But it's easy for them to really come to terms. It was very sad that 6 months down the road, the family of the late anesthist or my colleague, they did not come to terms to the fact that she passed on until they had to come and meet me, talk to me. I tell them everything. That is 6 months following her death. And that's how bad it is. And imagine that's it's a team, it's a family of a medical personnel. Yeah. And then also a continued support of survivors. They still have very many challenges. We witnessed we want to thank Professor Katerina for her work. When she organized and brought them so many survivors together like this, we realized that even the survivors from Gulu are experiencing the same challenges that we have. And as we've gotten a privilege of having a survivors clinic that supports, but them they didn't have. So it should be good for them to have that continued support of those people. And then about rabies is becoming also another challenge in our community, that I've lost a number of babies, and it should be something that we should communicate to authorities and so that we can try to do something about it. So before it really becomes a real epidemic. Okay, and can we move on? Christopher, please. Okay, yeah, this is just a summary of my gratitude to all the partners and everyone that managed to contribute so that this epidemic was really mitigated as soon as possible. It was really a good thing that we managed to stop it in a period of less than 3 months. And thank you so much. The next slide, please. Thank you so much. That's my last slide. I'm so grateful for that time. Sorry, it's a very emotional moment for me. Sometimes I tend to take quite a long time, but thank you so much. That's my sharing. I will be free to answer any question in case I'm not able to. I worked with Catalina. She can be able to help me with some questions. Thank you so much, Mr. Wayne.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kunsa.
What an incredible
experience.
We do have questions, but I think for interest of time, I would like to introduce our next two speakers, and then after that we'll have questions for the three of you. We have two Internews media mentors with us today, Adele Belletta and Kate Thomas. They're gonna talk to us about the differences between Ebola and Marburg, which is now a case, and discuss how journalists can best inform audiences about these diseases. So please, Adele and Kate, I hand it over to you.
Hi, Kate. Kate, do you want to follow up after Dr. Kusan, and then I can sort of maybe go a bit more about Marburg? How do you feel about that?
That sounds good. Thank you, Adele. Thanks, Wayne, and thank you to Dr. Kunsa for your fantastic presentation and for very generously talking to us about everything that you went through. So I saw that there was a question in the chat where somebody asked, when did this happen? What was this Ebola outbreak like? And let me just take a moment to share my screen, and I'll just take 5 minutes and talk about the recent Ebola outbreak in Uganda and some of the important ways in which, as journalists, we can report on this in a very empathetic and considerate way. So let me just try to share. Okay, can you see that screen?
Yeah, we've got it.
Great, okay. So as you can see, here's a map of the areas where we have experienced different strains of Ebola virus outbreaks in the last 23 years, so since 2000, and you'll see it's this red area that stretches from somewhat East Africa all the way across Central towards West Africa. So since Ebola was discovered in 1976, there have been a total of 35 outbreaks and a total of almost 35,000 cases, almost 15,000 deaths. So, in the beginning, death rate was really high, up to 90%. There has been a lot of variance in different outbreaks, basically depending on what's been available in terms of supportive care, treatment, and lots of other sociological and cultural factors that influence how quickly people have been able to access care. So the outbreak that Dr. Kunsa survived from and has responded to was an outbreak that just ended in 11th of January in Mubende in Uganda. Mubende is about 4 or 5 hours drive from Kampala in central Uganda. And this was notably an outbreak of the Sudan strain of Ebola virus, which we had seen in Uganda before. We saw that in 2000 in Gulu. So, what's important to note here, I think, is that it had been almost 23 years since between those two outbreaks, and yet there was not a vaccine available for the Sudan strain of Ebola virus. There is one available for the Zaire strain because that's something that came out of research and development since the really devastating West Africa outbreak. But even though all that time had passed, funding had not been prioritized to develop a vaccine for Sudan Ebola virus, and there is no proven therapeutic either. So the therapeutics that Dr. Kunsa and colleagues and other patients were fortunate to receive were experimental therapeutics. They are very expensive, very difficult to reach, to receive, and fortunately Uganda was able to receive shipments of some of those. So there were 142 cases, 87 people survived and 55 people sadly died, with a case fatality rate of about 39%. So below you can see the evolution of that outbreak. There were probable cases before it was declared in September, and you can see where the government instituted a period of lockdown in the Mubende region. And fortunately, because there had been predictions that it would last until, the mid part of this year, there were fears there would be many more deaths. Fortunately, that was declared over on the 11th of January. And so I just talk briefly about, Dr. Kunsa explained about how Ebola is a multi-endemic disease. And, here I've got just an image from a paper in Nature Scientific Journal that talks about the ways in which the different organs are affected. So, you can see it, all these different areas, these little Ebola variants enter through the mucous membranes in the skin. So that can be through the mouth or through the nose, through sexual transmission. It is quite difficult to actually get Ebola. It's not airborne. I just want to stress that. It's from body fluids, and these particles have to actually enter into your skin. If you have an injury, if you touch somebody who is sweating and symptomatic from Ebola and then touch your eye or your mouth, it's very easy to contract Ebola disease. So, and then it affects all these different systems. So, the gastrointestinal system with vomiting and diarrhea, the liver, the kidney, the brain, the immune system, the muscle, the circulatory system. And even when you recover from Ebola, the virus is very sneaky and it likes to hide out in these sanctuary sites, we call them, in different parts of the body. So that can be parts of the eye or the spinal fluid. In men, that can be, it will remain sometimes, in some cases, in semen just for a period of time. Women, it can remain in breast milk for some time, as Dr. Kunsa was talking about. So this is a really difficult virus, and you do not want to catch it. And so it really speaks to all the effort that we need to do to help to prevent future outbreaks. And of course, journalistic coverage and communications is a really important part of that. And crucially, I want to stress that even though Ebola is really devastating and obviously has a reasonably high fatality rate, if patients are able to receive treatment early, then actually outcomes are quite good. So, however, having said that, not all patients are able to get treatment early. And that may be for a number of reasons, starting from lack of physical access to Ebola treatment units. Often these outbreaks start in areas that are really unprepared for an Ebola outbreak. And so there just isn't the facility, the resources, the isolation units, the labs, the oxygen, all the supportive care that's needed. It takes time to set that up. And so what we need to move towards is a system where those places are already there, where we have access to all of that as part of preparedness. And then there are all these other elements. You know, I've kind of got this slide of a mountain range because that's what it feels like for many patients. You have to almost climb these mountains in actually getting to receive care, and all these factors play a part. So if, for example, a member of your family has the signs and symptoms of Ebola during an outbreak, but because of sensationalist media coverage, and by that I mean, a headline that is really alarming, or some misinformation that you hear on the radio, or something like that, because of that, sorry about these birds, they're very loud. Because of that, often people will be too afraid to go to an Ebola treatment unit and seek treatment. Rumors, saw so much of that during the Uganda outbreak, where there were all these false rumors circulating that were not true. Things like, if I go to the Ebola treatment unit, they will harvest my organs, sell them on the black market. Things like this, like absolutely, extreme rumors, which have obviously proven untrue. And as you can see from Dr. Kunsa's experience in ETUs, there is so much supportive care available, and absolutely, the best doctor clinicians to care for you are there. But of course, if you're afraid and you're a member of the community and you don't know this, it's going to be really almost impossible, really difficult to believe that you are safe going there. So we really need to get this information out and share this more accurately in ways that in future outbreaks, patients will feel safe going to seek treatment and recovering. And if I just jump ahead to this last slide here, I want to talk to you about, and this really proves the power of stories. And I think you can also see from what you heard from Dr. Kunsa's story, when we hear this story, it's very moving, it's very touching, and it really makes it feel real. And in that moment, you can empathize, you can relate to what somebody might have gone through. And by hearing those stories and sharing them as journalists, I think other people can start to understand, gosh, we really need to work on more preparedness, work on preventing outbreaks like these, and make sure that people do have accurate information, because it does save lives. So I was working on a project recently in Mubende, interviewing many survivors of Ebola, and I just wanted to share this story with you, because this is a story from somebody who was the first person in their community to come out of the ETU and survive Ebola. And when they did that, as you see here in the story, they said, people were seriously fearing me. They could not believe that someone could show up from Ebola. I started sharing my experience, how the ETU looks like, what is being done there. I said that inside they treated me very well. We eat when we feel like we want to eat. They treat you. If someone dies, then maybe the Lord has called them, but it's not because the doctors have not worked on that patient. And then the wife of one man came to me saying, my husband is having signs of Ebola, but he refuses to go to the ETU. Which advice do you give me? And I said, please tell him to go to the ETU. He will come back if he goes, and he will survive. And this man went to the ETU and he survived. So, that just really speaks to the power of these stories. What might have happened if this survivor had not shared his experience? We don't know. Maybe this person would not have gone to the ETU and not survived. So just don't doubt for a moment that stories about these outbreaks are really powerful and can help to prevent future escalation and to really, make sure that more lives are safe in the future. So I'll stop there and hand over to Adele, but thanks so much everybody for staying a little bit longer and for taking the time to listen.
Okay, thanks, Kate. I'm going to try and share my screen. Thanks so much, Kate. Let's see. Got to do this. Hold on, I'll try and do it as fast as I can. No, let's just try this here. Sorry, 1 minute. Can't find the share screen mode now all of a sudden. Let's just see. Where would that share screen? It's normally at the top and now I can't see it. Oh dear.
Adele, it's at the bottom and it should be green.
So, oh, there it is. Yeah, thank you. There we go. Desktop. Can you see my desktop by any chance? You should be able to see my desktop.
It's coming. Yes, we see it.
Okay, that's great. All right, so thank you so much, Kate and Dr. Kunsa, for these great presentations and making my life a lot easier. I'm going to try and move through this quite quickly. My task is really to talk about Marburg virus and to talk about the similarities and difference that it has with the Ebola virus. Now, why are we talking about this? Because we have had two independent spillover events in Africa, one in Equatorial Guinea on the west coast and one on the east coast in Tanzania. And these have given rise for great concern. The first outbreak ever was in Equatorial Guinea was reported on February the 13th. The cases actually were seen in January. And now, as of March 29th, according to the government of Equatorial Guinea, there are 13 confirmed cases and 28 suspected cases, including 9 confirmed deaths from the disease. Now, that means that this is an ongoing situation, an ongoing outbreak situation, and is definitely cause for concern. In Tanzania, they also had the first ever outbreak of Marburg on March 21. That's when it was announced. And as of the 5th of April, the situation has remained the same, with 8 lab confirmed cases, 5 of which were fatal. And that includes, I believe, 1 healthcare worker. There have been 160 contacts that have been identified, and these are being monitored. So 2 situations. It looks like the one is progressing in Equatorial Guinea, and it looks like Tanzania has managed to contain so far. I'm still trying to pick up how this is actually evolving. What's important here is that there's no evidence that the outbreaks in the 2 countries are epidemiologically linked. Okay, so it's 2 independent spillover events. Now, why is this a problem? Because the WHO is worried that this is going to pose regional risks. If we have a look, Equatorial Guinea on the left has porous borders with Cameroon and Gabon. And so far, the cases that have occurred in Equatorial Guinea have occurred more towards the west side of the country, Kidnetem particularly, and then Littoral and Centro Sur. These are sort of spaced about 150 kilometers from each other. So that's the situation in Equatorial Guinea. And in Tanzania, there are concerns about the fact that the outbreak occurred here in this section over here, which was the Kagera region, the northwest region, which has very busy economic and cultural borders with Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi. So the concerns are around transmission across borders. So far, that hasn't happened. So let's go back in time and say, what is Marburg? First of all, it's a member of the Filoviridae family, the filovirus family, and is a cousin of the Ebola virus. They both belong to the Filoviridae family, okay, and they're regarded as cousins. Marburg virus is rare, but it is deadly. So here's Marburg here, and there is what Ebola. You can see the similarities in what they look like. Filoviruses cause outbreaks which lead to high fatality in humans and non-human primates. They're a major threat to public health and species conservation. And they are both, okay, they both cause severe viral hemorrhagic fever. In fact, Marburg used to be called Marburg hemorrhagic fever. So that was the name of the disease before. It has now been changed, as you'll see in another slide. Okay, so the important point about the similarities here between Ebola and Marburg is that clinically they are very, very similar. The symptoms are very much the same, and they both have, they're both rare actually, and have the capacity to cause outbreaks with high fatality rates. So how dangerous is Marburg? Well, it's actually called Marburg virus, MARV, and it causes the disease known as Marburg virus disease, MVD. As I said, it used to be called Marburg hemorrhagic fever, but it's now called hemorrhagic disease. It's now called Marburg virus disease. Although the disease is rare, okay, we've already discussed that, it's characterized by high fever, hemorrhagic symptoms, and multiple organ dysfunction, which can lead to death, which is exactly what happens with Ebola. So very similar in terms of symptoms and multi-systemic functions involved, exactly as has been described by the previous two speakers for Ebola. The other issue is that, according to WHO, on average, Marburg kills half the people it infects. So if you have 2 people infected, one of them is going to die, with previous outbreaks killing between 24% and 88% of patients. The figure for Ebola is that it ranges from 25 to 90%. That's the fatality rate for Ebola. So very, very similar. And also, of course, as in the case with Ebola, it depends on case management. So, you know, if people report early, then the chances of survival are much greater. And of course, it depends on the virus strain. I've tried to pick up how many different strains there are. There are 2 main strains of the Marburg virus. Okay. So interestingly enough, where did the first outbreak occur, when and where? Okay, it occurred in 1967. And in fact, I found out that Ebola virus was first identified in 1976, so a matter of 10 years between the two of these 2 hemorrhagic viral diseases. So it first occurred in Marburg. There's a picture of Marburg on the right-hand side. It was in Germany, a very, very pretty sort of medieval town. And why did it occur there is because there was it's a very, very important research center, Marburg, and it was associated with the laboratory work using African green monkeys, which had been imported from Uganda. So it happened in Marburg. It also happened in Frankfurt, where there's another research center. And similarly, it happened in Belgrade, in Serbia, also due to the importation of African green monkeys. So the African green monkeys, that is the zoological name that you see there. We in Africa know them as vervet monkeys. They were the intermediate hosts, okay? And they're the intermediate hosts because they die quickly when they're infected. So that's not going to be the main host. The main host is the natural host, which are bats. These bats are the Egyptian fruit bats. They're both in Equatorial Guinea and in Tanzania. And they're the natural host. And the reason that they're the ones that live safely with the virus, so the virus doesn't kill them off. Okay, now what's important about these issues is about spillover events. We're talking about them a lot. Since COVID-19, we've been also talking a lot about One Health. We're looking at environmental health. We're looking at issues of pressure, population pressure on natural environments, where there's deforestation, where land is cleared for grazing, and we are becoming to live closer and closer and closer to animals, where the chances of viruses spilling over are much greater. Okay, so the interesting thing here also is that in terms of the Egyptian fruit bat, these they can also appear. They can also initially, what would happen is that they could also spill over to humans if, say, for example, bat feces are available or close by to a community or a house or what have you, and these are touched. They can be ingested and then can cause Marburg virus. So here we go. The other interesting point is that I found out, which is quite interesting, is that with Pfizer-BioNTech, the actual research center is in fact in Marburg as well. So that continues. That's where we know that they produced the 250 million doses in 2021 for COVID vaccine. So there's a link there even to today. Okay, so just moving on. this is a chronology of major Marburg virus outbreaks. There you can see in Germany, that was in 1967, there were 29 cases, 24% case fatality rate. This is Yugoslavia, that is basically in Serbia and Belgrade, because in those, it was still then considered Yugoslavia before the breakup. And then we had 3 cases in South Africa, but importantly, have a look here, 1998 to 2000, that was a 2-year-long outbreak, and that was 154 cases, 128 deaths. Also importantly, look at this one, Angola. Look how many deaths were recorded, an 88% fatality rate. That is extraordinarily high, all right? And then we had an outbreak in Uganda. There was one in United States, imported obviously from Uganda, the Netherlands. And then we had in 2017 in Uganda as well, 3 cases, 3 deaths, 100% fatality. And then added to that, in actual fact, the update on that is 2021. There was 1 case in Guinea, 1 case, 1 death, 100% fatality rate. And then in 2022, Ghana, 3 cases, 2 deaths, and then now Equatorial Guinea and Tanzania within sort of a short space of each other. So noting here that there's been a lot more outbreaks than in a shorter space of time than, say, for example, down here, which is also a cause for concern. What is going on? We don't know. Scientists are trying to work it out. So that's just an interesting map where it shows you reported Ebola virus fever outbreaks. And in red and in green, you can see the hemorrhagic fever outbreaks with Marburg virus. It looks like they're all more or less down here, the outbreaks for the Marburg, and here we have it for Ebola. And of course, the Democratic Republic of Congo here with both Ebola and with Marburg. Okay, symptoms, I'm not going to go into those because they are absolutely as similar, in fact, almost identical to those with what we've discussed with Ebola. But what's important here is a person with MVD, and that's Marburg, is not contagious until symptoms appear. So that's how, sort of human-to-human transmission actually happens. The other important thing is that incubation period is about also up to about 21 days, similar to Ebola, except that the illness is virtually immediate. It begins very abruptly. Okay, so transmission, infection results from prolonged exposure, for example, to mines or caves inhabited by the bat colonies. It's through human-to-human transmission. That's how it spreads. Direct contact through broken skin or mucous membranes with blood, secretions, organs, or other body fluids of infected people, and so on. Again, healthcare workers at great risk. They're often infected while treating patients, close contact with patients, and this becomes really important because it's about infection control precautions when they are not up to standard or they are not optimal, which is really very important. You can also get transmission via contaminated injections or needle stick injuries. That's also very, very important. Burial ceremonies, as in the case with Ebola, same thing. And again, as emphasized that with Ebola, Marburg is not spread through airborne transmission. So in case there are any myths about that. Prevention and treatment, very similar to the Ebola Sudan strain. No vaccines available, no antiretroviral treatments. Antiviral treatments have been approved. WHO talks about supportive care, rehydration with oral or intravenous fluids, and treatment of specific symptoms, improves survival. And then, of course, they have been looking at what Dr. Kunsa was talking about, monoclonal antibodies. They are under development. And then also the use of remdesivir and favipiravir. That's also being looked at in clinical studies for Marburg. So very similar train of thought around how to treat but certainly no vaccines. What's important again about the vaccine front is that the WHO has got together a Marburg virus vaccine consortium. Under that particular consortium, there are 5 vaccine candidates. That's besides another 28, okay, that are in early stage studies. These candidates, as you can see there's a Sabin candidate, and it is in a phase 1 clinical trial, as well as the Janssen & Johnson vaccine at the bottom. It's also a phase 1 trial. Apparently, the University of Oxford also has a vaccine candidate. It says it has 1,000 doses that can be immediately tested, as well as the Sabin says they've got 750 doses. PHV, which you see over here, has got several hundred doses that these can be actually taken straight down to Equatorial Guinea, to Tanzania, to start doing real-time studies. This is what they want, but it depends on Equatorial Guinea and Tanzanian approval, which has not been given yet. There are a number of important factors about these two outbreaks that feel a little similar to what happened with COVID-19. There's not enough data coming out of Equatorial Guinea. There are complaints. WHO is complaining they're not getting real-time data. The stories from that we are hearing is that there are 13 confirmed cases. That's what Equatorial Guinea said. CDC can't confirm that. I'm talking about Africa CDC. So mixed stories coming through, not enough confirmation and not enough communication to WHO apparently from Equatorial Guinea, and that's a problem. The idea is also, hopefully, WHO is talking about ring vaccine trials for Marburg, as was the case with the Zaire virus on West Africa with the Zairean virus for Ebola. So there's a lot of, I would say that there's a lot of uncertainty at the moment. It's not quite clear. I tried very hard to see if there are any more cases, and it's really hard to get any information out of Equatorial Guinea. But it does seem that Tanzania is a bit further down the road. So I think these are two very important stories that we are going to have to cover. There are very, very serious illnesses, Marburg, as well as Ebola. And, the idea that, the story that Dr. Kusan has so courageously told us, and the fact that he is still with us is extraordinary. And one can't help feel the depth of emotion, one does feel when you actually are witnessing a person telling a story about somebody coming back from the dead. And I just feel that, we as journalists need to keep on going with this Marburg story, following it up, finding out why, is the data not coming through from Equatorial Guinea? Are there more cases? They apparently suspected 26 more cases, but we don't want to go down that horrible track that we had to go through with COVID, the unknowns and so on. So it would be great if we can stick to following the story. And then, of course, WHO says efforts are underway to mount an emergency response. WHO has deployed health emergency experts in all the relevant places and cases, but we also need to track that as journalists. We need to track exactly what WHO is doing. We as journalists need to be independent, and we need to follow up on what is being done about the situation. And thank you for that. And I'll hand over back to, and I'm sorry if that was really very quick. I just tried to cover as much ground as possible. So, but I'll hand back now to Wayne. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Adele and Kate. We have run long today. We had technical difficulties, which of course, I think it's amazing that so many people from so many different countries can just talk like this with that one click. But of course, I remember floppy disks and I remember fax machines, so I'm more easily impressed than other people. We were going to have okay. Hamid, I don't know, you're still there. Can you spend a couple minutes with us, or do you really have to go?
Yes. I'm still here, so
okay.
To have the opportunity.
Okay, Hamid Kashan, he's with UNICEF, and he monitors community feedback in the East and Southern Africa region, and looks at the social media talk about how people are feeling about Marburg and Ebola and other issues. And of course, it's got to be very confusing for people having now two very similar health threats in the region. So. Okay, Hamid, could you take us through what people are saying?
Sure. So I had a few slides for you, but in the interest of time, I'll just talk to you about what the community is saying. And my job is essentially to look at the entire information ecosystem and identify narratives that are concerning the communities and might have an impact on how people perceive the vaccine, the treatment, and surrounding advice from their ministries of health. So one of the first things that we saw with the Marburg advent was there was a huge spike in interest and conversation in Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania, understandably. But that tapered off very, very quickly. Right now, we're standing at it almost exactly as the same place as before when the outbreak was announced. That means that the media interest and the public interest has almost gone away. That is dangerous, because if we don't keep the interest, if we don't take this opportunity to educate the public and educate the media on how to report on it and tell the public how to protect themselves, we might have to do this all over again in a future outbreak. Plus, there is an increased interest and conversation about Ebola, but none of this conversation is necessarily about Ebola. It's almost always in comparison to Marburg. People are talking about how do we have a brand new virus? How many viruses do we need to know about? I'm so tired of them. Are they even real? They're making up this stuff. And that almost always leads to vaccination and COVID-19. That since COVID-19, they keep finding new viruses. They keep telling us I need another vaccine. And they keep telling us that I need to now protect myself from this. So the trust in vaccines and vaccination is affected. And that is something that we need to be concerned about. And we need to identify how to deal with this. We have tons of rumors and specific narratives, things like another big vaccine push coming. And WHO is the vaccine for the Great Gull. There is a lot of hatred for vaccines, not necessarily for Marburg. So our recommendation is that we keep preemptive statements ready with ministers of health, that if in case a country is facing challenges with acceptance of treatment or acceptance of advice on how to protect themselves from Ebola and Marburg, then the statement is ready that there is no vaccine for Marburg, but there is a vaccine for Ebola, and these are the ways that you can protect yourself, and that the Ministry of Health is overseeing the response and is fully involved and responding to the outbreaks. So unfortunately, I wish I could spend more time and show you the slides I have. Wayne would be kind enough to circulate the slides, but I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. I have to drop off another call, but hope to see you all in a future call again. Thank you to all the presenters.
Thank you so much, Hamid. And we'll see you again next time, next dialogue. Wonderful. Yeah, okay, so I think we have taken up our time, but I mean, just wonderful, thoughtful presentations today. Dr. Kunsa, I think your story is amazing. And one of my many takeaways from your talk was that psychosocial support is so vital for the person when they are at their sickest, and also after, for people who have recovered. There's a lot of issues to deal with, and maybe that's something we need to talk more about in future dialogues. So as we wrap up, I just want everyone to know that we will send a recording of this dialogue to everyone who joined us today. And we will be sending audio excerpts of today's presenters also to our full journalist network through WhatsApp. As always, we'd love to hear from you about how you use the information you got today, and send us your work so we can track how useful these dialogues are, and tell us if you have any other topics you'd like us to look at in future dialogues. So again, many thanks to Dr. Hadson Kunsa, to Adele Belletta, Kate Thomas, and Hamid Kashan for joining us today. And until next time, for the RCCE Media Working Group and my co-moderator, Tole Nyata, who we didn't hear much from today for time reasons, I'm Wayne Sharp saying thanks for joining us, and please stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.